Hello and welcome to the Farming Week, the podcast from Agriland that keeps you up to date with all the latest in Irish agriculture. I'm Charles O'Donnell and I'm joined by O'Brien and Rubina Freiberg. Well, you might remember from last week's podcast that Teagasc's National Farm Survey was one of the main topics of conversation, and it painted a troubling picture of farm incomes in 2023. It remains to be seen how 2024, which has seen no shortage of challenges for farmers, will shape up. Further economic research from Teagasc this week shed some light on what farmers can expect in 2024, and there may be some positives to take from that, Aisling.
Yes, so Charles, Teagasc published its annual Situation and Outlook for 2024 back in November. And since then, as you said, there has been a lot of changes to contend with. Both market and production conditions have changed somewhat. So the economists at Teagasc have gone back to the drawing board and they've brought out this report this week, revising what they foresee as the picture for 2024. So it considers the developments in the first 6 months of this year in order to come up with this revised assessment. Now, as you said, the economists say that the Irish agriculture sector is facing a mixture of challenges this year, which will come as no surprise to farmers, but perhaps some of the figures that we're going to outline may come as a surprise to farmers. So the year to date, they said, has been marked by difficult weather conditions. Of course, we had the heavy rainfall over the last few months, in particular coming into the early part of this year. And the report said actually over the 9-month period from July 23 to March of this year, rainfall levels were anything from 30 to 60% above normal across the country. Feed prices this year have continued to fall gradually, we were told, and that they're over 15% lower than the same period last year. Now, feed prices are at their lowest level in over 2 years, but those prices are still considered high as they remain about a quarter above the level that we would have seen back in 2020. Now, as of July, official data on feed sales for the current year that are available from the department only relate to the first quarter. So we only have the first 3 months of this year, and they do show that beef feed sales were up by 1% in that quarter and dairy feed sales were up by 3% in volume terms relative to the same period in 2023. Now, the report shows that fertilizer prices internationally have fallen significantly, but those prices remain about 50% above their 2020 level. And it also notes that there has been a reduced sales volume for fertilizer this year, but we're still waiting on data, which we'll get later in 2024 to give a picture, an overall picture of the year entirely when it comes to fertilizer sales, Charles. Now, unfortunately, Charles, the report warns that for tillage farmers, they're facing another challenging year this year, and that's against a backdrop of lower cereal prices and a decrease in production volume, which will lead to a lower output value this year again. And they said that total production costs this year are forecast to decrease for tillage farmers, but not enough to offset those drops in market conditions. And as a result, the average tillage farm income this year is likely to remain in the low 20,000 bracket on a whole farm basis. And, that's a serious drop on the levels that we've seen in recent years, Charles. So it is a very grim picture there for the tillage sector. So the baling payment that we're going to be speaking about in just a little while hopefully will help boost incomes somewhat this year and into next year, but maybe not enough to get them out of that low 20,000 bracket. More positive news for the other sectors, again, albeit off of a very difficult 2023. In terms of dairy, the economists say there's only a slight reduction in total milk production costs likely this year, and the extent of the increase in milk prices will be the main determining factor of milk margins, unsurprisingly. And they said that the average milk price for this year is now likely to be up 7% on the average for the previous year, which is, of course, when we saw some big reductions coming off of the highs of 2022 as well. Now, they said dairy commodity prices are expected to remain little changed on the current levels for the rest of this year, and milk production in the year to May is down actually 6% on the same period last year, and of course that is due to low deliveries in the first quarter of the new season as well. And I suppose in 2024, this report is saying that average dairy farmers should see a net margin in the range of 10 to 11% per litre. And they are estimating that the average net margin would translate into an average family farm income on dairy farms of close to €70,000 this year, which would be an increase of over 50% compared to last year. Now, looking at cattle and all of that side of the house, the average annual price for finished cattle in Ireland is forecast to be 1% higher than last year. For weanling and store prices, that's due to go up by about 2%, according to the report. They say that the contraction in the UK beef supply, which our colleague Breffney O'Brien has been reporting about in the last quarter of this year, is forecast to continue into early 2025, which should support live cattle prices in Ireland in the short term. And they also expect incomes on cattle rearing farms, suckler farms, and on finishing farms as well to increase this year as well. So a more positive outlook there across dairy and beef, albeit from a difficult year last year. And just to touch on the sheep sector as well, Charles, the economists are saying that margins earned from sheep production are forecast to remain above 2023 levels, and they would be on par with what we would have seen back in 2022. And they said the decrease in average production costs will further offset positive output value changes. Now, they are saying that sheep farm incomes are forecast to increase to an average of about €15,500 this year. Now, look, I know, Charles, there's probably farmers out there, they're going to be screaming at their phones or however they listen to this podcast, and they're going to be perplexed when they hear those numbers, especially dairy farmers out there, because they've had to, a lot of them, supplement their animals to keep up their milk solids because of that poor grass growth earlier this year. And, that has had a major cost implication on farm as well. So we'll have to see how this all pans out and if these predictions, which I stress are averages, do come to pass. So watch this space.
Yeah, absolutely, Aisling. And I suppose it would be fair to say, and you touched on it a couple of times, that any positives to be gleaned from this, I suppose, should be seen in the context of a fairly bad 2023.
Yeah, absolutely. There's probably a lot of farmers out there, and we've heard it from the banks as well. They're looking to dip into overdrafts at the moment. Cash flow has been reported as a problem out there, Charles, by the farm organisations. They're hearing it back on the ground that, the increase in having to feed animals this year against that poor grass growth, it's really eaten into any level of profit that you might have come out with if you were lucky out of last year as well. So it has been a very difficult year. It's a report that makes for very interesting reading against what we had last week on the show when we were going through the 2023 report on incomes on farms out there. But as I said, we'll have to see what comes to pass. These are just averages. I do hasten to stress again, as they say in political circles, we'll give it a health warning and we'll see how it all pans out.
Well, we mentioned dairy farmers there a couple of times, and we should just point out that the Department of Agriculture, Food and the Marine has this week contacted dairy farmers who are yet to declare which nutrient excretion rate band is applicable to their herd's dairy cows for 2024. And Agriland has an article on that, which you can check out on our website and app. But moving on now, and we're continuing our coverage on the podcast of matters related to the straw incorporation measure, specifically the new scheme for payment that will run in tandem with the straw measure for baling. We got to see some terms and conditions of that scheme this week, Aisling. Can you take us through it?
Yeah, here are the T's and C's of a new acronym, Charles, for your lexicon when it comes to farm schemes. The Baling Assistance Payment, or BAP scheme, has been officially launched this week. And as you said, it's going to run in tandem with the straw incorporation measure, as Minister Charlie McConalogue previously outlined. He had decided to reinstate that scheme this year following a backlash against his proposal to pause the popular tillage scheme against concerns, I suppose, for fodder shortages out there. So the objective of the Baling Assistance Payment is to boost fodder supplies out there by providing support to farmers who choose to bale straw on an eligible straw incorporation measure parcel rather than chopping it and incorporating the straw back into the land. So as you said, the T's and C's have been released by the Department of Agriculture this week. And just to run through some of them, we've a full rundown on Agriland if you're interested in this scheme. And I know a lot of farmers out there will be. So in order to be eligible to apply for BAP, farmers will have to have applied for and be notified of their acceptance into the Strong Corporation measure this year. And only SIM parcels accepted into the scheme can be considered for withdrawal. And applicants must notify the department in writing before September 30th this year of their intention to withdraw a SIM eligible parcel for this baling measure. And only then, when it has been accepted by the department, this withdrawal, will applicants be provided with a BAP application, which must be completed and returned to the department by September 30th. Now, as we have reported here on the podcast, there will be a payment rate of €175 a hectare, which will apply for eligible crops that is subject to a minimum of 1 hectare and up to a maximum of 40 hectares. So the department has advised farmers that in cases where the withdrawal of a parcel from SIM brings the eligible SIM area below the minimum 5 hectares, no SIM payment will issue. So that is something to bear in mind. It might suit you better than if you have a small amount of land in SIM. And the baling, assistance payment won't bring you underneath that threshold. So, it's just a matter of doing the maths there if that might affect you. So the eligible crops under the baling assistance payment are wheat, oats, barley and rye. Oilseed rape is not eligible under this scheme. I suppose unlikely to be suitable for baling anyway. So those are the crops. So wheat, oats, barley and rye. And we were told that there is no subdivided parcels will be considered eligible for BAP except where those parcels were already notified to the department back when you applied in May for the Strong Corporation measure. So that would have been before May 15th as well. Now, geotagged photos are going to play a role here, Charles, as well. Farmers would be familiar with geotagged photos from the Strong Corporation measure, and it is something that I suppose is becoming more common out there. So those photographs for all parcels will have to be uploaded through the Ag Food portal or emailed to the department. And as the actual baling is a central requirement, of course, to this scheme, those photos must clearly show the baled straw in the parcel. And you can find a guide to these geotagged photos on the department's website, what the criteria is for them, because you will not get a payment under the baling assistance payment scheme if you do not use geotagged photos, and they need to be provided. So that is very, very important as well, Charles. So all payments that will be made under the scheme, they're going to be subject to EU state aid rules. So that means that any applicant has to remain within the €20,000 aid limit within a 3-year period. If that applies to you, just keep an eye again, as I said, on the figures there. And the department said that aid paid out under the baling assistance payment will be considered towards the applicant's aid threshold for the next 3 years. And it's anticipated that payments under BAP will be made in the first quarter of next year. So that's where things stand at the moment. New acronym, new scheme, and an additional payment option for tillage farmers if they choose to withdraw from the Strong Corporation measure and go baling instead this year.
Thanks, Aisling, for bringing those details to us. Moving on now, and there's been a lot of discussion this week about new rules affecting the supply of veterinary medicines coming in under the Veterinary Medicinal Products, Medicated Feed and Fertilisers Regulation Bill, which was signed into law in July of last year. Rubina, what's the latest on this?
Well, there have been stark concerns raised over the past week about new rules coming in affecting the supply and prescription of veterinary medicines. And I suppose in an attempt to ease those concerns, the Department of Agriculture, Food and the Marine met with veterinary, farming, retail and pharmacy organisations yesterday. Now, that meeting comes after Veterinary Ireland raised its concerns over the potential consequences of the Act for vets, including job losses, animal health, public health and the agricultural industry, with Minister for Agriculture, Food and the Marine, Charlie McConalogue, earlier this month. According to Veterinary Ireland, it has been proposed that an assessment form could be filled out by a retailer and sent to a vet, who would then write a prescription for the animal requiring antiparasitic products without talking directly to the farmer. And the proposed changes would also allow for prescription-exempt vaccines to be supplied through retail premises, so licensed merchants and co-ops without the involvement of a vet or pharmacist. And any changes to the supply of veterinary medicines would obviously also affect merchants and co-ops, for which reason an industry meeting was held this week between the Irish Cooperative Organisation Society, ICOS, the Independent Licensed Merchant Association, and Acorn Independent Merchants. Following the meeting of the merchant groups, ICOS said that its core message is to ensure that everybody that is currently able to sell veterinary medicines to farmers can remain viable and stay in business, providing maximum possible choice for farmers. Now, after the meeting with the department yesterday, the Irish Farmers Association has said that it made a number of proposals which it believes must be addressed to ensure that the impact of any changes on farmers is kept to a minimum and all current actors in the sales, supply and prescribing of veterinary medicines remain actively involved. Now, the department this afternoon told Agriland that it held a constructive consultation yesterday with veterinary farming, retail and pharmacy organisations, and that the views of those organisations will be considered in the formulation of the Veterinary Medicinal Product Regulations 2024.
Thanks for that, Rubina. And just while we're talking about veterinary issues, we were told this week of persistent challenges posed by infectious bovine rhinotracheitis, or IBR. A study of IBR testing results in beef herds highlights a herd-level prevalence of 48.8% and an animal-level prevalence of 11.4%, indicating that IBR is endemic in the population. Again, we have an article on that which you can check out on our website and app. But our next item on the podcast doesn't bring us too far from animal health issues, and that is the control and prevention of certain noxious weeds, with ragwort of particular concern as it's fatal to cattle. It is an offence for landowners not to prevent the spread of ragwort and certain weeds, and prosecution is possible. Aisling, we got interesting figures this week on the control of ragwort in Ireland in recent years.
Yes, Charles, as you said, the Noxious Weeds Act, dating from 1936, makes it an offence for landowners and occupiers of land not to prevent the spread of certain weeds. Yes, as you said, ragwort, Bouchelon bui, the Irish name, of course, for that tall plant with that cluster of yellow daisy-like flowers, so distinctive when you see it in a field and so unwanted as well. It also includes thistle, dock, common barberry, the male wild hop plant and wild oats as well. They're all on that list under the Noxious Weeds Act that landowners are obliged to prevent the spread of them as well. So as you said on Agriland this week, interesting figures from our colleague Colm Ryan that he got from the department, who told him that there have been 134 reported cases made to the department since 2019 in relation to these noxious weeds, but no prosecutions have been taken under the Act in recent years. Now, the department issues notices to destroy letters to landowners in all instances where it becomes aware of the presence of these noxious weeds, either as a result of inspections or as a result of reports that can be made from the public as well to the department. And the owner of the lands where those weeds are found and are found not to be being controlled is subject to the provision of that act, which does include a fine on conviction as well. So I suppose it's a fine that could be up to €1,000, interestingly, too. And Minister for Agriculture, Charlie McConalogue, said that in the 10-year period from 2014 up to last year, there were 198 complaints relating to noxious weeds, and 56% of those complaints related to agricultural lands. Of course, complaints can be made about local authority lands or other lands as well where these weeds are getting out of control. And I suppose if you have a holding, Charles, where these weeds aren't present and you're looking over the ditch and they're going wild next door, it's not something that you want to be left going uncontrolled as well. And look, it is something that we have been looking at on Agriland, because earlier this month we reported that the Agri-Food and Biosciences Institute in Northern Ireland said that it has seen an increase in submissions of carcasses in the last month exposed to ragwort, and the most recent cases submitted to it were from outbreak situations with multiple deaths affecting bovines from around 12 months to 18 months of age. And of course, as you said, ragwort poisonous to animals out there. it's not very palatable as a plant, so they're unlikely to eat it when it's growing in the field, Charles. It's more likely that they're going to consume it when it's been cut and made into maybe bales of silage. It might be put into the pit inadvertently, or it could be in hay. So that's when, I suppose, the sugars rise, it becomes more palatable and animals will eat it then. But then maybe there could be cases in the latter part of the year where grazing might be poor and animals might have no choice but to have a go at the ragwort, essentially. And that's where we can see problems, because there is actually no cure to ragwort poisoning. So it is something that we want to, avoid at all costs. And our Agriland tillage specialist, Richard Halloran, wrote about this in recent weeks as well. And he said that infestations of ragwort are now of epidemic proportions, to his mind, going around the country as he does. And he said the weed seems to be gaining a foothold as well in silage fields. He said he wasn't sure why this was the case, but it could be the weather that we were talking about a little bit earlier on. Maybe some land got poached and, just it's difficult conditions to get out there to tackle weeds in some areas earlier on this year. So, maybe that's a reason why ragwort is taking a hold. But it is something that, farmers should be very, very wary of. And particularly on silage ground, it's not something that you want chopped and put into bales or into the pit by any stretch of the imagination, because we are seeing reports of ragwort poisoning out there, particularly from the north. But we have seen some in the Republic as well.
Moving on now, and a claim has been made that an apparent lack of hedgerow management is leading to a significant number of road traffic accidents on rural roads. That's the opinion of the Association of Farm and Forestry Contractors in Ireland, or FCI. Aisling, what exactly has the FCI said here?
Yes, Charles. So the FCI is calling for clarity on the regulation and enforcement of the Road Safety Act because, as you said, it believes that the management of roadside verges is contributing to creating higher risks for all road users, particularly those in rural areas. Now, it has written to 3 government ministers. They are Minister for Transport Eamon Ryan, Minister with Responsibility for Nature Malcolm Noonan, and Minister for Agriculture Charlie McConalogue. They've also sent their concerns on to the National Parks and Wildlife Service and the chairs of local authorities around the country. Now, they did say that the rural roadside verges are dominated in the summer by large and vigorous plants like hogweed, the cow parsnip and knotweed, which the FCI said are not habitat areas for nesting birds. And they said that those plants significantly reduce summer road space and they're leading, in the FCI's opinion, to road-related accidents. Now, the national chair of the FCI, John Hughes, said that local authorities should employ suitably qualified and registered hedgerow and verge management contractors. And they also believe that roadside hedge and verge management initiatives should strive to meet multiple objectives, which would include a safe road system, protection of roadside nature and biodiversity, and be cost effective as well. Now, the association has called on the Departments of Nature, Transport and Agriculture, along with the NPWS and local authorities, to provide practical guidelines for rural road verge management. And they added that an immediate programme should be put in place as well to allow for fast and practical decision-making processes. And they said that that would allow local authorities to use the power given to them to deliver practical, workable and clearly proven road safety initiatives for rural and local road users. Now, I know, look, Charles, not everybody is going to agree with the FCI on this, and people would point to the fact that accidents on rural roads can be caused by numerous factors, including speed and dangerous driving behaviours, maybe being on a mobile phone as well, and alcohol and drugs, of course, too. And, they would point to the need for biodiversity in our hedgerows and, the importance of protecting hedgerows, particularly in the summer months as well. So, look, it's not something that everybody's going to agree on, but I know that the FCI had struck a chord this week with Agriland readers on this issue.
Yeah, the hedgerows thing, Aisling, is very often an emotive topic. But I think, to be fair to the FCI, I think it's something worth pointing out. And I think something to do with road safety always is.
Yeah, and I think this isn't a case of, going and cutting every single roadside verge all over the country. I think if it's applied in a practical manner and, a sensible manner, that it would only be targeting areas where it is becoming a risk to road users and, that everybody would just use common sense where that is, it's so important when it comes to something like this, because we don't want to damage our hedgerows either, Charles. That's paramount as well. But we need to ensure that people can travel the roads safely out there.
Yeah, well said, Aisling. Finally this week, in some international news, a community of nuns in Uganda has been provided with a brand new tractor courtesy of a group of Irish farmers and agricultural businesses. Aisling, what's this about?
Okay, so we're heading from the rural roads of Ireland to East Africa for our final story this week, Charles. Uganda, as you said, to be precise, which is a landlocked country. It's about the size of Britain and has a population of over 49 million people. So that's some, I suppose, table quiz knowledge for you on Uganda if you should ever need it. Well, the nuns of the Little Sisters of St. Francis, they have a 450-acre farm in an area of central Uganda called Busungu. I hope I'm pronouncing that right. And the Order of Nuns was established by Irish nun Mother Kevin, who arrived in the African country from Ireland back in 1902. Now, as you said, the farm, it has been mechanised for the first time just recently, thanks to the generosity of a group of Irish farmers and agricultural businesses as well, because they came together to gift a brand new 4-wheel drive heavy-duty tractor, a plough and a trailer for transporting goods around the farm, the value of which was to about 45,000 euros. So a very generous gift indeed. And the nuns are now hoping to majorly boost production and sustainability on their farm, and they'll be using that boost in productivity to fund an agricultural training centre, to clear land for a new health clinic for the local community, and to complete their convent as well. So Michael Maguire from Virginia in County Cavan is a spokesperson for the group of Irish donors. He's actually a frequent visitor to Uganda as part of Belfast-based agribusiness Devonish. And he said they were delighted to help the Little Sisters of St. Francis, who have done so much to improve lives in Uganda. And he said, of course, that agriculture is the lifeblood of any community, and that they hope that this donation will empower the nuns and better the lives of the people that they support. And he said that the initiative was a coming together of Irish farmers and businesses who all, I suppose, dug deep here, Charles, and made sure that this farm could be boosted by modern technology and mechanisation as well. And he said it was a phenomenal response. When they asked for help, everybody jumped on board. And Sister Rita, who's the Superior General of the Little Sisters of St. Francis, said that this gift will not only lighten our workload, but also enable us to grow more food and better support our community. And she said it's a blessing beyond words. So a lovely story there from Uganda to finish off this week, Charles. And fair play to everybody who made that happen. And we wish the nuns out in Uganda all the very best into the future.
Thanks, Aisling. Just before we go this week, we just want to congratulate everyone who took part and was successful in the finals competition of the Young Members Association of the Irish Holstein Friesian Association, which took place recently in Kilkenny. And very finally, we just want to let you know of a fundraising tractor run and auction taking place on Sunday of this weekend in Tullow, County Carlow, in aid of a young farmer, Tom Eustace, who was very seriously injured in an accident while attending a wedding in Rome. The money raised through the tractor run and auction will be used to aid in Tom's recovery. You can find out more about the tractor run by reading the article on our website and app. That's where we'll leave it for today. Please don't forget to rate, review and follow The Farming Week on Spotify, Apple Podcasts or wherever you get your podcasts. We'd love if you could spare some time to give us 5 stars and share The Farming Week with anyone you think might be interested. From Aisling, Rubina and myself, enjoy the bank holiday.